This is the Church of St. Paul in the Desert. Aren't I glad I got to preach on this gospel? I have rarely had the opportunity to study a scripture in preparation for preaching and find that several of the scholars say, in all of the time that I've studied this, I haven't actually been able to figure out what I think it means. And one of them said, but here's 7 options. And here's why they don't work. So my goal in this is not to give you all 7 options that I don't think will work, or to illuminate you on all the things that I've figured out don't make sense, but to try to maybe give a little context and some points where you can make a connection with this and continue feeding on it and reflecting on it. I would have to tell you that anytime you hear a sermon, here or anyplace else, never is it going to tell you everything there is to be said, nor will it ever be the last word about the particular reading. Today, more than most. Okay? Now, I want to focus first on the collect today, the prayer that goes with the particular Sunday. It reminds us not to be anxious about earthly things, but to love things heavenly. And even now, while we are placed among things that are passing away, to hold fast to those that shall endure. Don't be anxious about earthly. Love things heavenly. In the midst of things that are passing away, hold fast to what will last. Frankly, I think that that's a great context for connecting with this gospel, and it's a great context, I think, for connecting with our lives. Do the times that we are in and have been in for the last several years, are those times that make you think everything is fine and going along? One day we'll look back and say, this was the good old days? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. These are times that are, in many ways, major causes of anxiety, right? Is there anybody here who hasn't felt a little bit anxious about whether their job is going to last, whether their pay will be maintained, whether their nest egg will be there in 5 years, let alone when they retire? I think all of us have shared in that same kind of anxiety. And I believe that a lot of that anxiety, well, the context that we're in is very much like what the collect says, as we're in the midst of things that are passing away. I think for those of us born like in the 50s, we kind of grew up thinking that everything was going to be smooth and great and move along because we just finished the 2 wars, our parents had anyway, finished 2 world wars and everything else. Today it seems even more like, oh my gosh, where do we connect with all this? What will last? And then we get financial crisis. And I don't know if any of you, when you listen to this lesson, thought of any connections with the financial crisis. One person that I read, and I'm going to read you his name because, frankly, it's not a common name, and I don't want to forget it, and I don't want somebody on YouTube to claim that I'm stealing, or I'm stealing without attribution. Clint Schneckloth, a Lutheran pastor from East Koshkonong Lutheran Church in Cambridge, Wisconsin. Let me do that again. Clint Schneckloth is the pastor of East Koshkonong Lutheran Church in Cambridge, Wisconsin, and he was writing in the Journal of Lutheran Ethics. And it is a wonderful description, and he was complaining about so many people that try to make out like this particular gospel where the person is doing something that's easily understandable as us as something that was good. Because that manager at the end of the day is commended, not condemned, by the owner. And we don't know how to place this. But this particular pastor was writing and said, it does seem an awful lot like something like Lehman Brothers. On September 11th in 2008, while the company was trying to find funds to stay afloat, there was another group of executives who were trying to make sure they could guarantee $21 million of bonuses for employees who had been terminated. And I believe those employees got the bonuses, the company went under, and everybody else is kind of paying the tab for this. The manager found that was confronted with his bad behavior. He was told to hit the road, and he decided to make a way for himself before he had no other choices left. So he took the debts that were owed to his boss, and he cut them. He did not take the money for himself. He cut them so that people would feel a debt of gratitude to him. He also cut them, and the people of the community probably felt a debt of gratitude to the owner. They probably were ready to put him on their shoulders and carry him around town because the amount of debt that had been released was absolutely massive. So here's the point. On the one hand, we have folks in the face of crisis, in the midst of things that are passing away, in order to forestall anxiety, hang their hat on making sure they get the bonus. On the other hand, the manager, in the midst of things that are passing away, to deal with the anxiety, made sure that debts were released so that people might be more hospitable to him. To be honest, it doesn't smell very good even in the best of scenarios. But in his case, he wasn't making something for himself. He was doing something that actually benefited the entire community and even gave his boss honor in the community around him. Now again, that's one idea. The last line of the gospel tells us that we cannot serve God and money. So in the context of the collect that I talked about, in the midst of things that are passing away, serving money is really much more like focusing on being anxious about earthly things. But if we love God, and if we put our trust in the things of God, we actually will have some place to hang our hat in the midst of those things that are passing away. But there's a word in this, and the word is you cannot serve God and mammon, the word served. It would probably be better if we translated that word as enthrall, or be a slave to. The word is not somebody who just decides to serve somebody. It's to belong to somebody. So the idea, if you belong to money, you can't belong to anything else, let alone God. If you belong to God, you don't belong to anything else. Any of the isms or other things that often get in our way don't have first priority on us when we belong to God. And it's our relationship with God that should determine how we interact with all of those other things.